We are going live on Facebook. Perfect. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Happy good afternoon, I guess it is now, not morning anymore. Welcome to the session of the community table. We're gonna be letting some people funnel in here, and then we'll jump in and get started on the on our discussion for today. Hope that everybody survived the freeze. I was in Breckenridge last week, and when we left, it was 30 degrees in Breck, and I got to Broomfield to pick up my dog, and it was 3 degrees in Broomfield. It was very disturbing, to say the least.
Usually goes the other way, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. That's what I was expecting. All right. We've got some people trickling in here, and so we can kind of jump in and get kicked off. So again, good afternoon, and thanks again for joining us. I am Ian Campbell, and I'm CEO of Mission Suite. And as always, my partner in crime here, Mr. Dean Isaacs, the founder and CEO of Vantage Group, is here. So Dean, thanks for being the steady hand here.
Yeah, absolutely. I just enjoy coming back. You keep having me back.
That's it, man. That's it. It's well, as long as the attendees like to keep listening to us, we'll keep doing this, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So before we jump into this conversation, today we're going to be talking about 3 simple steps to generating high value clients, thinking small and creating systems or creating kind of micro systems to grow your business with Evergreen Revenue. But before we dive into that, I want to address a couple of housekeeping items. As always, we're taking questions throughout the session today. If you're watching this on the replay, definitely go ahead and drop questions as they come up into the comment section, whether you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or on YouTube. Be sure to drop your questions into the comment section. We'll get those answered as we can. If you're here live with us today, we're taking questions throughout the session. So go ahead, and there is a raise hand button down there at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can raise your hand if you want to actually ask your question live, or you can go ahead and click on that Q&A button there to submit your questions as we go as well, and we'll pepper them in as we can answer them. Again, just to introduce Dean, he's a serial entrepreneur with over 20 years of hands-on business growth, sales, and marketing experience. He works with business-to-business companies across the U.S. that range from startups to the Fortune 500. His passion is helping small and mid-sized businesses achieve their growth goals by developing and implementing high-impact sales, marketing, and growth strategies. He and I were having a conversation about this, kind of a follow-up from our last month's session. And if you haven't watched last month's session, definitely go check it out on YouTube or on Facebook, so you can kind of get caught up on that as well. We were talking about kind of the conversation that we had between the two of us and Katrina about kind of thinking small when it came to business growth, and that being kind of a big trend that we're forecasting for this year, that we're looking forward for this year. So I thought that we would when we were talking about this, we thought that we'd kind of dive in a little bit deeper on it, and really start answering some questions here. So Dean, you want to just kind of start off by recapping what we talked about last month, and giving us a sense of where we are as a starting point for this conversation?
Yeah, of course, happy to. So we talked a lot about micro content and micro campaigns, and different ways to produce content and produce revenue, but not having to roll out massive programs, large engagements. So there's this concept of micro memberships, for example, where somebody may pay you $10 a month to receive a daily email or text messaging is going to be a big trend next year or this year. A daily piece of content with a tip, a trick, maybe it's a motivational quote, whatever your thing is, right? It doesn't matter what the content is necessarily, but $10 a month doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have hundreds or even thousands of subscribers, it adds up to real revenue, and it can be this automated way to generate revenue. So this concept of micro content and micro revenue is what we talked about last month, and where we're going to sort of head today is, well, how do you do that? How do you actually create revenue from this idea? What's the concept of evergreen? We've thrown that word out, that phrase out in our description of today's event. So we'll touch on what evergreen content is and what evergreen revenue is, and hopefully sort of frame up this strategy that you can put together for your business. So I see some friendly names and faces friendly names on the list of attendees today. And for the most part, people that attend the community table webinars, they're service providers, right? Some have products, but for the most part, they're in the services business. So what can you do to take that knowledge that you have in your business and break it down into a way where somebody can start working with you at a lower cost, but then you have a great strategy to move them up to that higher paying engagement or project?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you touched on this concept of evergreen revenue a couple of times, so, I mean, we talk about evergreen. Evergreen has kind of become a buzzword over the course of the past few years that marketers love to use to talk about leads and talk about content and everything else. So kind of can you define evergreen revenue a little bit deeper for us?
Yeah, so maybe we should break down evergreen content and evergreen revenue, right? Because they are different, they're similar but different. So you're right, the concept of evergreen content has been thrown out, and not everybody on the call today is a marketer, so they may not understand what that means. So at the most basic level, really evergreen content is content that you can use over and over and over again, and it doesn't go out of style, right? Or it takes a minimal amount of effort to maintain it periodically. So I'll give you a quick example. Like your demo, the webinars and demos you do for Mission Suite, right? Mm-hmm. Fundamentally, Mission Suite doesn't change on a weekly basis. Right. You add new features, you add over time, but for the most part, month to month, week to week, it's the same.
I suppose this is where my sales brain comes in and says, well, it's changing all the time, right? But yeah, you're right. Yeah.
But fundamentally, there's not like a wholesale change every week.
Right.
And from like the high level, the main reason why people buy Mission Suite is probably pretty consistent over a period of time. And so creating that sort of canned webinar demo of the product, that's evergreen content. You can just keep putting that out there, putting it out there, and that draws people into your sales funnel. And the hope is they see that and they say, I'm interested. They raise their proverbial hand to go into the actual sales conversation. So that's an example of evergreen content. Another could be a checklist, for example. So you and I both know some fractional CFOs in town, right? Mm-hmm. And one in particular talks a lot about cash flow, right? And how cash is not the same as cash flow. So how does a small business owner manage their cash flow? They need a cash flow projection, right? A spreadsheet. So that template, that spreadsheet, doesn't change very much over time. So he could use that as a piece of evergreen content that he could offer to his leads to show his value and expertise. They can do it, they can download it, get onto his email list. It doesn't go out of style. He doesn't have to update that thing every week or every month. So that's an example of evergreen content, okay? So if you think about evergreen revenue, it's the concept of having evergreen content. So maybe it's a sequence of emails, maybe it's social posts and emails that drive people into your sort of like sphere of awareness, right? They understand you're around. Then they say, I want that piece of content. They download that piece of content. And then there's the next step, which then offers of something of value to sell them. It's all automated. It's just a series of emails that takes somebody through this journey. And so maybe we'll use the CFO example. Maybe the free piece of evergreen content is the template. And then there's a series of emails that follow saying, if you need help filling it out, you can sign up for a one-time low-cost consultation, right? That's revenue, right? That generates revenue. So if you have that system in place and it's out there in the world and it's running and it's running and it's running and it's running, you don't have to do anything except show up for those appointments with that client at that point because they're prepaid for that consultation. So that's what the sales funnel or the evergreen revenue cycle looks like.
So Evergreen Revenue, if I'm understanding this correctly, Evergreen Revenue is basically is the revenue that's generated from some sort of evergreen content, not necessarily, not necessarily evergreen or revenue that's just like Mission Suite is a monthly subscription thing, right? So that, but that's not necessarily evergreen revenue. Evergreen revenue, when we're talking about that, we're talking about revenue that's generated as a result of these evergreen pieces of content. Is that right?
Yeah, it's the system that leverages the content that produces revenue automatically.
Okay.
That's kind of what we think about. So now the thing that you sell at the end of that process could be a one-time thing, a download, a masterclass, a one-on-one consulting opportunity, or it could be a membership, right? So that would have a reoccurring revenue impact. But when you think evergreen revenue or evergreen sales funnel, think about an automated system that's almost hands-off once it's built, and it produces a lead that downloads something of value, then gets sold into something that they have to pay for. And then at the end of it, you do the thing, right? You either deliver the service or the products or whatever it is, and you generate revenue. But all of that effort that we spend in prospecting and lead follow, it's automated.
Right.
That's the key.
So this really is just the clear extension of this micro trend. Is that accurate?
It is. And because a lot of the micro content that we've talked about producing last month and the ways to create micro revenue, those are tangible assets that you have to leverage in this process.
Okay, excellent. So, last month we talked with Katrina about the I don't remember what it was. It was like a writing course or something like that, like Cards Against Humanity style writing thing. Yep. That is a perfect example of this, right? Yeah. But even still, even hearing this kind of an example, it feels like it's a little pie in the sky for a lot of people, right? Because again, we're talking about, if you're an outsourced CFO or, maybe like an outsourced CMO, right? Somebody somebody who's providing these high level services, right? I mean, what are we creating that we can really pare down and develop that kind of that funnel that is actually that's valuable to people enough to make them pay $10 for it?
Yeah. And so the thing that you deliver, we talked about micro content and micro memberships and kind of stuff, but the truth is with this sort of evergreen process, depending on what you offer and who you offer it to, that piece of paid content or advice or whatever it is can be more than $10, right? It could be $250. So if I'm, let's say I'll use an example. We're going to do a 2-hour masterclass on this thing. There's going to be downloads. There's going to be, prep work. There's going to be follow-ups. That thing's probably worth $500, right? So the thing that you offer varies, and that's something that we'll get into maybe later on in our conversation today, or even next month. Is how do you come up with that thing of value?
Right.
But in the concept, or in the example of the CFO, a CFO, especially if they're a fractional CFO, they're charging, good dollars for the services they provide. It's high value services. So does it make sense for them to go through all of this process to create this system to generate $10? Probably not. But their $10 of value thing may be more like a $250 consultation. And so if you think about their sales process, they're generating leads, they're engaging with those leads, they're trying to qualify them into qualified opportunities, convince that prospect that they're the person to do the work, probably give away some free consulting along the way, right? And hope they buy it. Well, if you flip that around and say, you draw that lead into the funnel, they download or absorb or take in some of your valuable content, then they say, I'm interested. Well, that level of interest changes if they know they have to pay. So if they are willing to pay the $250 for a free for a consultation to help them build out their cash flow projection, I've just experienced working with that CFO, right? I've just paid for the right to be a qualified lead for them, right? There's enough value in the messaging that I'm willing to put $250 on the line because maybe that's not a big risk for me. And I really get to try this person out. And then the CFO has the opportunity to add tons of value and set them up for the next conversation, which is the larger engagement. But you have to have that sequence figured out.
Yeah, and I guess when in that case of the CFO and the $250 consult kind of a deal, I suppose that's a way to qualify your leads too, right? Because if you have somebody who's not willing to pay $250 to help you go through the cash flow analysis or whatever the thing is, then they're probably not going to hire you in the long run, right?
Yeah. And they can download your free stuff all day long.
Sure.
Right. But they're never going to move beyond that level of relationship. They're just, they're just gathering stuff. They're not actually serious about it. So when you put that next step in the process that's paid, it does flush out a lot of the garbage out of the system too.
Right.
So then, like we've said, they're kind of paying for the right to have that conversation with you, whereas normally we're chasing as a salesperson.
Right, right. So one of the things that I know we talked about last month too was scalability. And so I want to dive a little bit deeper into that when it comes to actually setting up this system, because, when we talked about scalability last month, and insofar as, social ads and things like that are really fueling this thing. But I mean, this is one of the great benefits of this Evergreen system, right? Is that you can scale it up.
Yeah.
What happens if you scale too far?
I guess it could be a good problem to have, right?
Right.
Clients, and then you've got a different issue with scaling your business.
Right.
Well, the nice thing is that you can turn up and turn down the volume on these campaigns, right? So if the very tip of the spear where you're going to be engaging with new people in the world is social media ads, let's say you're running ads on Facebook or on LinkedIn, you can obviously turn that up or down, right? And any kind of paid advertising, whether it's Google, or, Google paid search or advertising on any platform, as soon as you stop putting money in the machine, the ads stop running and you stop your lead flow.
Right.
So you have control over that. And really, there's a benefit to that. We work with a lot of clients that want to increase their lead flow and they want to do SEO and they want to do paid search, and they don't realize that Google AdWords and SEO are two related but very different things. SEO takes a long time to establish sort of organic leads to your website, traffic to your website. But anytime you're paying for leads of any kind, they're pretty quick. Assuming you've got your campaign set up correctly, those leads come in quickly and they stop as soon as you stop paying. So I'm not overly concerned with that. I always tell clients that's a good problem to have. That's a different conversation. But I think where the wheels tend to fall off is when you're relying on content to drive leads. All right. And you and I both know, and I'm sure a lot of people on the call today realize that producing content on a regular basis, good content,
right,
it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort. And that good quality content is really important in these campaigns. Even if you're using paid search or paid ads, if you don't show up anywhere else, the likelihood of them clicking on that ad is probably pretty low. But if they've seen your quality content on a regular basis, you've established yourself as an expert, and then they see an ad, there's a high likelihood of them clicking. So I think of content, I don't want to go too far off, maybe on a rabbit trail here, but think of like the Gartner quadrant in terms of content. If you think about the vertical axis, you've got consistent content. At the bottom of that axis, you've got inconsistent content, right?
Sure.
And then on the left and the right, you've got hands-on and hands-off. So if you're in the lower left, it's hands-on and it's inconsistent. That's the worst place to be when you're putting these campaigns together, because it's always on your mind. You feel guilty when you don't produce content. You want to be in that top right-hand quadrant, right? So you've got consistently putting out content, and it's hands-off. It's automated. That way you stay top of mind with your audience. And so the goal with these evergreen campaigns is to create that content once and put it into an automated system that continually just runs the campaign using a tool, a marketing automation tool. Mission Suite is a perfect example of using a tool like that. Maybe you could even speak to sort of how that would work from a sort of platform standpoint, but you don't have to create tons of brand new content every week. Once you understand the sequence and the pieces of content you need, you you go over to Ian and you say, hey, how do we do this in Mission Suite? And it runs.
Yeah.
So how would that work? How would that work in Mission Suite?
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, so there are a number of different ways you can do this with platforms, right? And Mission Suite obviously is one. And so in this case, we'd be so you go to a sign up form of some sort to download the first piece of content, right? And it's the download this form or whatever the case may be, and that's what gets people into your funnel into the very top of your funnel, and then they move, and then you start to drip content to them respective to the initial piece of content that you created, and also with some sort of a conversion message, usually a softer conversion message, like you say, by the way, if you need help filling this thing out, click here to let us know, and you can send, and you can look at what that looks like, right? So that kind of a thing. And so that's where it becomes, I mean, and that's kind of the low hanging fruit, right? It's most automation platforms should be able to do at least that, so you can get people into the system and then start dripping emails to them thereafter. And then we talk about and talking about paying for something, talking about upgrading to a micro membership, talking about upgrading to some sort of a paid something, right? Mm-hmm. That's when whatever your micro is, again, for for a fractional CFO, $250 is micro, yeah, right? Because they're probably making 10 times that every month at the very least, excuse me, to just to do the things that they're doing. So so whatever your micro is, you can have people pay for that, and then you can automatically move them into specific groupings or segmentations of, this person is in the quarterly check-in bucket, this person is in the monthly check-in bucket, so on and so forth, based on what they're buying, right? And that's where you can, and that's kind of where, and that's one of the next questions that I had for you, is because you mentioned messaging too. Yeah. Right. And so how do you, because I mean, you got to imagine that, hey, you downloaded this thing. If you want our help to do this, it's just $250. Trust me, it's going to be worth it. So just write the check.
By now, right? Just by
exactly. Now. Right. But after that, there's some massaging that needs to take place, right? And that's where, like the segmentation comes into play. And that's where, segmentation and kind of journey building, if you will, to use our own phrase to go from there.
Yeah. So I think that's right on. The messaging is different and the content is different for where the buyer is at in their journey, right? Their process of trying to solve this problem, right? Nobody spends money usually in business unless they're trying to solve a problem. And that problem can be something easily defined as I need better accounting, or it could be I need to grow this thing more quickly, right? A little harder to wrap our arms around what the symptoms of that is. But so if you think about the stages, right? We've talked about this in prior events. This sort of the first stage is discovery. From the buyer's perspective, they're out there just trying to find information. And so your content should be focused at the beginning of this sort of campaign, if you will, this sequence on discovery. You want to be known, you want to be found, and you want to be seen as an expert, or like at least this person has a sense of what they're doing, right? That's what discovery is about. It's just being aware, creating awareness around what you offer to the people that may want to buy your stuff. So typically the discovery content is going to be a little more broad. It's going to talk about bigger issues, bigger problems. You want to cast that wider net early on, because you'll filter them as you get down through the funnel. And so good content for discovery, the discovery sort of phase, are any of your social media posts, right? Usually those are little snippets, little chunks of information, short videos, easily consumed. Video is really good for discovery because they get to sort of see you and listen to you and kind of get to know you, even if it's a 30-second video on something. Video is really, really good for discovery. We've talked about ads, certainly paid ads. You're just going to gather more eyeballs using ads. But even things that are not digital, like direct mail. Direct mail can be good. You have to have the right structure around direct mail so you can track it and convert that person that picks up the postcard into potentially a lead. But direct mail can be good. Networking's a good one too, right? We've kind of forgotten about, in-person networking these days, but that's a great way to be discovered in the marketplace, is to just be out there and be visible. So now obviously those aren't an email sequence, some of those things, but just generally conceptually being known about and being seen as an expert is the kind of stuff we want to focus on at the discovery level. So as you move through the sequence, the next would be, so maybe to use your example, the discovery phase is describing a particular issue that you help solve and offering a free template for something, or a free checklist. The checklist is a good one. Here are the 8 questions you need to ask yourself about this problem. And so the person that sees that, let's say, social media post, clicks on the link, goes to your website, puts in their phone number, email address, name, whatever you ask for, and they get this checklist. So now they know about you, and they see that you know enough to be interesting to maybe continue some kind of dialogue. So the next stage from discovery, you go on to consideration. And consideration, you want to just be you want to be in the conversation, right? If they're going to buy something, you want to be in the conversation. So what would be the next set of messaging to move them from that free piece of content to maybe that's where you offer that low cost offer? Maybe it's a low cost consultation, or with the download, it's just the checklist, but there are 5 other things you really need to execute. They have to pay for that stuff, right? So, think about your content in terms of where they're at in their journey of making a buying decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess if we get down to, and I want to kind of drill down on this even a little bit more, is if we get even more tactical as far as messaging goes, if we want to move somebody, especially when it comes to moving somebody from that $250 and the micro thing into the high value client, right? Because that's kind of the key thing that we're talking about here, is that the $250 is nice, and I can do 50 of those a month, which would be great, and I could have a good business out of that. But it's it's owning a job at that point, not something that's repeatable and scalable and business like, right? So, but to do that, I've got to be able to get into I've got to be able to transition that person into that next step of okay, now it's time to buy a higher dollar thing. It's time to buy my services. It's time to hire me. So how are we messaging that? Whether it's getting online, whether it's getting, like, what kind of things are we saying to, and obviously it's going to depend on the industry, right? But let's take, let's take employment law, right? Let's, something to that effect, right? So how do we move from the, here's how to fill out the employee handbook to here's where you need to engage me on a regular basis to be your kind of eyes and ears, whatever that next step is.
Yeah. So I think that there's a couple of things to consider. One is, if you're a knowledge-based company, right, you're an expert in something, or you don't have a tangible product that you're selling, no widgets, you're selling your knowledge. Now that knowledge may be packaged up in documents or whatever, but nonetheless, you're a knowledge-based business. I can almost guarantee that you're giving away too much knowledge for free as you pursue your prospects. So there's probably low-hanging fruit right there that you can change your mindset and change your approach. And instead of doing the free analysis that so many consultants do, where's the perceived value in that? People pay attention when they pay, right? And so if you can elevate yourself in your mind first, that this analysis is of value, and that's the ticket to enter working with me, is to pay this X amount for this analysis that has this higher value, then you can convert that lower dollar offering into a higher paying engagement, because normally you just give it away for free anyway. Mm-hmm. So I would encourage everybody on the call to think about, what do they give away for free in their sales process? And if they can tie tangible value to that, then that's your offer that you put into your evergreen marketing process. Instead of just going from lead to qualified lead to, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get you as a client. No. You have to commit to the relationship too by paying for this thing. So that's a great place to start. And I would imagine that most people on this call can find something we're giving away for free that is of value. But a lot of times we give it away, we say it's of value, but we don't really show it's of value, if that makes sense, right? We don't see that perceived value in it. We can talk about, it's X amount. You got to change the way you think about that giveaway to be able to present it in a way that is perceived value for the prospect too. So
Yeah.
that was a little bit of my high horse there. I know, but I see it so often.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one too, because there is I mean, at the end of the day, the value of a product or service is only, we can say that it's worth this much money, right? Like doing this is worth $97. Well, but no one's willing to pay me $97 for it. So, unless someone's willing to pay you that much money for it, there's no value to it, right? So
you have to have that story, right? You have to have
right.
that value story that goes along with it. So if that, it's like, let's say it's an evaluation of some kind, right? Some kind of analysis of your business. The story could be, here's a really cool thing that you might want to use. And if you like it, talk to me, we can do some work together. There's no value in that. Right. But if you can say that, if you take if there's one key takeaway in this analysis, what we've found is that one key takeaway equals $20,000 worth of cost savings for our average client, then $500, $1,000, that's a no-brainer.
Right.
Tie tangible value and past experience as well.
Wow. Interesting. So we have a chat here that brings up a really good point, right? That Cynthia is saying that most potential clients are going to want to know if they have a case, right? And if you're a lawyer, or that's probably not uncommon to hear, right? I want to know if I have a case. So give me an hour of your time while I tell you what's going on, and you can give me free legal advice insofar as whether or not I should go to court. Right. And I mean, her point's a phenomenal one, that it requires time and attention to listen to the story. It's not like you can just be sitting on a Zoom call, watching the screen while you're checking emails, right? So with someone like that, with an offering like that, right, that does require a little bit and it can be a bit of a challenge. How can we flip that around? And definitely putting you on the spot here, because this is speaking as another marketing guy, this is a challenging scenario for sure. Right. Yeah. But so, how do we flip that around into a $250, something?
Yeah. So I think if you think about it, we've talked about giving away something of value for free, and then having a tangible next step to sell them something of lower cost. And then that lower cost being turned into a larger engagement, right? So think about those 3 steps in the process. In this particular case, the first thing that comes to mind is that free thing of value is, maybe it's a 5 question qualifying document, questionnaire. And for me to even talk to a potential client, they've got to fill out these 5 questions. So if they don't fill them out, they're kicking tires and they're price shopping anyway. So I don't want to do my sales funnel. If they fill them out, and if I've done a good job creating those questions in a way that helps me get enough of a knowledge base that it's worth another conversation, then that's the free piece of value. Right? If they want to talk to me as the attorney, right, I'm well known enough that they want to work with me, they've got to do something as well, right? This has got to be a balanced relationship. So they fill out the 5 questions, and me as the attorney, I need to make a judgment call at that point. And I know there's lots of variables, but does this seem like there is a case, or does this seem like there isn't a case? Right. So that's, for me, that's a go, no go. Right. If it's a no go, you tell them, you have some canned response. Thanks for completing this thing. I don't think you have a case, or whatever you want to say. I don't know what the legal jargon would be. I don't want to put legal words.
Not a right fit for me, right?
Yeah, thanks, but no thanks. But if there is a potential case, then you have a greater sense that there is a case, and then you can maybe move right into that next step, which is the engagement, right? I know there's still some risk there, but the client, the potential client, at least feels like I've been heard, and then I still would be very wary of giving away free time at that point. But I would be more willing to say, based on what you've said, it really feels like there's a case. Here's how you can work with me. And then you tell them the process. The
Right.
next step is a paid meeting. So they feel like they've been heard. They feel like they've been, they're not qualified, but their case has been sort of qualified. And then they're more likely maybe to move to a paid step.
Yeah. And kind of just looping it back to the tools aspect of it, right? And then looking at automation. So there's in marketing automation, there's this concept of lead scoring, right? Where
Yeah.
you can kind of score leads based on their responses.
Mhm.
And, of course, it's easiest if you're using, like an A, B, C, or D, or true or false, yes or no kind of a thing. But you can also, I mean, you can also set up forms that are, have that where people type in and that are looking for key phrases inside of those forms and score that
Right.
contact based on that. And then based on that score, you can trigger an email to be sent out that says, sorry, you're not the right fit for me, or I'm not the right fit for you. Again, whatever the polite way of saying I have no time for you would be. And then, or turning it around and saying, hey, listen, there might be something here. Let's, here's the next step that you can take to learn more.
Yeah. So you can
Yeah.
look at that sort of like unqualified lead process. And anybody that's selling anything, when a lead comes in, somebody sort of shyly says, yeah, I might be interested. We're usually on it, right? We drop whatever we're doing and we're on it. Don't waste your time on 50% of those that are never going to move through the sales process. So if you can automate, at least at the highest level, that kind of lead qualifying process, and even if you get 20% of them out of the way,
yeah,
that's still 20% of your time saved. So I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's interesting that you bring this up and that you kind of classify it this way, because so often when we talk about evergreen anything, the focus is all originating online, right? It's always originating with some sort of a social platform or some sort of a blog article or whatever webinar or whatever the case may be. Whereas, this is something that you could easily create. And I mean, I know you mentioned networking before, but you could easily create even for people that call you out of the blue and say, hey, listen, I think I have a case. Your next step can be, to turn it around. And of course, what people do for themselves is going to be up to them and how aggressive they are with using these types of forms. But that can be kind of that first step in anywhere, right? So no matter what the lead source is, I guess you can kind of put something like this into practice, right?
Absolutely can. And you can also track where that lead was originated and how they got to the form. So then you can manage that stuff too. So we're probably all doing lots of different things to get our brands out there. And sometimes it's hard to know what that sort of initial touch point is. But when you've got a low barrier for entry, which is a form, let's say, you can track how that traffic's coming in. And I think the other thing is it's all in the messaging too. And so instead of just saying yes to whatever the question is your prospect is asking and thinking, I'll figure that out later on, I found that with certainly the subject matter expert type clients, when they share the process of how you can become a client, how we can work together, you share that process, then the next step makes sense to the prospect. First, he's saying, go to the form, fill it out. We may call you, we may not. It feels like you're dealing with Comcast or something, right? It's just impersonal. But if you have, let's say it's an automated email that goes out when inbound inquiries come in, and it very respectfully lays out, here's the process of working together. We do this, then we do this, and we do this. Then there's a much higher likelihood of them following that process because they know what to expect and what's in it for them, versus just saying, we don't talk to anybody, fill out the form, maybe we'll call you, maybe we won't.
Right.
Nobody's going to fill it. So the mechanics are important, but the messaging is just as important to get people to follow.
Right. Absolutely. That's interesting. So, you know, I remember when back when I was in San Diego, and it was, you know, I had an office downtown, and in one of the offices near mine, there was the Inc. magazine was doing some sort of a thing, and they said, you know, the guy that was speaking said, okay, anybody who has recurring revenue in their business, raise your hand, right? And so, you know, a bunch of people raised their hand. And then he said, everybody else, look around. He said, I guarantee you these people sleep better at night than you do. Right. And so I bring this up because I want to pull this back to memberships, because memberships by their nature have a recurring model. Right. So if, you know, if we're looking at some of these types of things, what is, you know, we talked about, you know, like the forms are like a, you know, kind of a preliminary case analysis, or, you know, the document with the help filling it out that's worth $250, whatever, you know. But if we can pull it back to a membership and say, for $10 a month, I'm going to get 500 people to do this, and they're going to get this value out of it. Excuse me. I mean, that again in and of itself is evergreen revenue, correct?
Absolutely.
It's an evergreen revenue system. So what can be some examples of valuable content that we can lay out for some sort of a membership like that? Or does it need to be content? Can it just be a call? Can it be, I mean, if we ever decided to start charging for this, you know, I mean, we'd go from, we'd have like 3 people, you know, my mom, my sister, and my dad, and my sister would be a maybe, right? But yeah, so I mean, but if, you know, like those types of things, what sort of things can we do to provide that value that's worth paying $10 a month for?
Yeah.
Or
And
whatever.
so, yeah. I think that the micro memberships we talked about last month, typically they're less than $10 a month. They're something short, sweet, easy to produce. You can batch produce whatever it is you're selling, you know, months at a time, literally, and then just get them in the system and they go out every day. That's a high volume business, right? $10 a month, high volume business. Even if you convert 10% of those to the premium content and 2% to the one-on-one consulting, right? It's still a numbers game.
Yeah.
So if you think about content and the tangible or perceived value of content, I think you need to break it into 3 categories. There's the do-it-yourself content. So it's us producing templates and outlines and checklists and workbooks and all that stuff. And we sell that. And the hope is that Ian, the good business owner that he is, will take my brilliance that I put into a workbook and apply every lesson learned on your own. That's a do-it-yourself piece of content, right?
Right.
The reality is that people don't execute as much as they need to when they get do-it-yourself content. But do-it-yourself content has high perceived value, but low tangible value.
Right.
Because I get the stars in my eyes. I'm going to have a $10 million business next month if I do all the stuff the thing says. You're just not going to do it all, right?
No, so, I've downloaded a lot of that stuff. I still don't make $10 million a month.
Yeah, yeah. It's just filling up your hard drive.
Right.
And so if you want to hang your hat on do-it-yourself content, you need some of it. You need a volume of it. And it's probably going to be sold at lower cost, right? And so if you think about the next thing, it's sort of like this concept to do it with you. As the subject matter expert, I'm going to help somebody execute. So they're going to get the do-it-yourself template, and maybe we do this group call once a month. The expert's on the call, and you got all your members show up, and they work through some issues. So it's doing it with you, right? And we're giving you advice, and we're supporting you along the way. The percentage of success and impact, positive impact, goes up exponentially when I do it with you. Because I'm helping, I'm coaching, I'm consulting, I'm moving you along, I'm answering your questions, I'm holding you accountable. The group is holding you accountable. There's group brainstorming going on, right? Facebook groups, right? There's a ton of private Facebook groups that you pay a membership to be part of. And you get all the assets, all the downloads, and you get the group stuff, and you get to ask questions. And they work really, really well. Really well. People get good results. Now, 20% of the people get really good results. The big chunk, it's the bell curve, right? The big chunk in the middle, you know, they see some benefit, and the rest don't. They just spend their money and never showed up. So it's do it yourself versus do it with you. And then the final is the do it for you. right? That has the highest tangible and perceived value, where a client comes to me and says, we need this thing, we need help with our sales strategy. And I say, great, I'll come in, I'll work with your team, but I'm gonna create this thing for you.
Mhm.
Takes time, my time. It's the highest tangible value because I'm doing it for them and I'm making sure it gets executed. There's accountability and we're following through. So if you think about what the thing you want to sell at the end of your evergreen process, you may have a DIY, a do-it-yourself offering. And maybe there's a premium offering that's slightly higher value, that's a do it with you membership, for example. And then ultimately you're going to be able to convert some of those into consulting clients, which is the ultimate in terms of value for both you and the client. But having that logical process in mind is really important, because you know that the further they get through that journey, the fewer are going to convert. But what I've found is, so I have a membership, I run a small group of, it's a group consulting model. We have 6 members. It's really small. It's exclusive. It's like a lot of time. But a number of those members pay more to spend extra one-on-one time with me because they see so much value in it. So in theory, I could have a content library where people could just pay a small amount and get access to all my templates. They can upgrade to this sort of virtual group where it's a lower cost than the one-on-one, but it's still the group concept. And then if they want to work one-on-one, they get the VIP treatment. They get to pay for that. So I think you got to think through that whole cycle and where your offer lands.
Yeah. Interesting. So that do it with you model is an interesting one, because it's an interesting step in the process. Because that's where, from what I'm hearing, that's where the payments actually start, right? That's where people start paying you for, a monthly subscription, whatever the case might be, is with that do it with you format, right?
Yeah, and you can structure it however you want, right? So the do it with you could be, like I said, like a monthly or a twice a month call, where everybody that's a member can dial in, throw their questions out there, and you get to kind of pick and choose who you work with. It could be that. It could be a 30-minute one-on-one. Doesn't have to be just working with the group. I mean, you can slice and dice this thing however you want. If the goal is to make the do it with you scalable, then the less one-on-one time you build in, the better, right? Because there's only so much one-on-one time you can do. But you can have 5 or 5,000 members dial in, and you're still covering the same content in the same amount of time. So how you structure it is really important. Or it could be they get access to all the documents and templates, and they get X amount of time to use one-on-one over a 6-month period or something like that.
Right.
You can structure it a lot of different ways.
Yeah. And that's interesting to me, because it's something that, again, if we're, going back to the employment law aspect of it, right? I mean, there's things that as a business owner, I need to make sure that I'm constantly being kept aware of, and I know what I'm doing, and I know what I'm talking about. I'm not stepping into landmines, which are all over the place, right? When it comes to anything to do with people. So I mean, it works for something like that, all the way through to like IT or insurance or background checks, and all those different things. There's ways that we can kind of create those opportunities for people to say, this is what you're going to be doing, and I'm going to be walking you through this, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So what happens that I see so often, and it is so common, is that a company or a couple of firms will get together and they'll do a webinar. Right. I've got an example. So I've got a client that does HR consulting. And there's a bunch of new state of Colorado HR/payroll laws that came out this year. And with all the craziness of COVID, a lot of small business owners kind of saw it flash across their screen, but they don't really understand what Comps 37 is. They don't know what the what the Equal Pay Act is. They don't know. And so my client's going to do a webinar and hit the highlights of they're going to pick 3 of those laws, regulations, and just explain what they're all about to these business owners. That's awesome. Lots of value. should get good attendance. It's a topic on a lot of business owners' minds. But what I see so often happen is it just stops there.
Yeah.
They do the webinar and they say, call us if you have questions.
Right.
And you know the phone doesn't ring.
Right.
Right?
This is not a field of dreams concept, right?
Yeah. And so the call me if you have questions doesn't work unless in the rare occasions you hit the right person at the right time and they're like, holy cow, I need this thing. Generally speaking, it doesn't work. And so if they sign up for the webinar and they show up for the webinar, then you need to have this evergreen process or this campaign set up behind it that during the webinar, you pre-sell the next step. It's not a sales pitch, it's an education. So during the webinar, you would need to inject throughout the conversation about how we help clients make sure that they don't fall in the hole or in the trap of these laws. This is the process we go through. And we have this paid evaluation or whatever you want to call it, right? And you just tell them this is the process to go through. And then the follow-up is the sequence of emails that get these people to sign up for the consultation.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like an assumptive process, right?
Right.
But 99% of webinars, they say, call us if you have a question.
Right.
And like I say, they just don't. So
right.
A lot of people have got this sort of first step already going, but it just stops. You got to take it to that next 2 or 3 phases.
Right. You know, and kind of jumping back to the tools conversation with this too. So you talk about webinars. There's a tool called Everwebinar that I think it'd be worth people to be aware of as well, because it's a system that it's like $500 a year or something like that. I don't know, whatever it is, but it's a virtual webinar, and so you record the video and then you load it up onto YouTube, and then you can publish it through Everwebinar, and then, they also have their own webinar jam webinar thing too, but yeah, so you can always go that route as well. But you post up your video of the webinar up onto Everwebinar, and then the nice thing about this is that the forms that the HR forms or the checklists that they want to give out, they can drop in, and you can actually download it off of that, and it can measure those things, right? And then they can have those, and you can drop in. There are all sorts of webinar tools out there now that allow you to drop in payment links for people to actually buy stuff right on the webinar. And Everwebinar is one of them.
Yeah. So it feels interactive. It feels relevant. It feels now.
Right.
But it's automated. You built it once.
Exactly.
And so from a marketing perspective, you're going to generate content that drives people to that webinar.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the goal. That's the job. Yeah. If the webinar is set up in a way that converts to whatever the next step is, paying for something, signing up for something, that's a key piece. And then you can automate that next phase too. So that's the thing about, you can have your messaging down, you can have your campaign sequence down, you can have all of your call to actions, all of that stuff is figured out.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't become evergreen or automated until you use the technology to drive it.
Right.
I think that's the part where the wheels fall off. Like I said, it's that sort of lower left quadrant where it's inconsistent content and it's hands-on. No, it doesn't happen. If I'm having to recreate the wheel every day, every week, every month, it just doesn't happen. So really making sure you've got your goal, right? What is it you're going to sell, and kind of the stages as you reverse engineer that, the messaging and the process, but then you've got the tools and technology to run the system. Because if you don't, then it's not evergreen. It's manual. Yeah,
right.
By definition, it's the opposite of evergreen.
Right. Exactly. It's funny you talk about that lower right quadrant of hands-on and what infrequent or whatever. Yeah. I think about the YouTube videos that I produce every month on a regular or on a weekly basis, and I use with my iPhone, and I use my just my iPhone to do it, but I dropped my iPhone and it cracked into the camera. So now I can't actually use my iPhone to record these things. And so the one thing that I've always been consistent with, and even though it's been hands-on, it has just become that much more challenging. But so yeah, the more hands-on, I guess my point being that the more hands-off you can do this, the better. And you're not going to be worried about dropping your phone and cracking your camera.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's another consideration is you don't have to do it all yourself.
Right.
There are lots of good virtual assistants and people out there that are very, very inexpensive
Mm-hmm.
that can crank out content and can keep you on task and can do the things that you need to do while you're doing the high value stuff in your business. And I've been in business a long, long time, and it's taken me so long to kind of figure out what can I outsource, right? I've got to do it all. It's all me. Well, the reality is no, it's not. And
Right.
so I found an amazing person that does a lot of my content, and she's amazing. She just gets it done. We have conversations once a week, and she's off and running. She saves me hours and hours and hours of not only time that I shouldn't be spending, but probably time I would never even get to.
Right.
So in all of this stuff, get help.
Yeah.
Help. You don't have to do it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And speaking of your Instagram posts with the swipe right of the how-to thing, very good ideas. I mean, if anybody's not following Dean on Instagram, make sure to check it out. But
Instagram's a fun platform. It's got a different vibe to it, but
yeah,
if you're not on it, you should be on it. There's some really great content and good people to connect with out there.
absolutely. Absolutely. Beautiful. Well, we're coming up on the 3 o'clock hour here. So just to, if anybody has any questions, before we wrap up, you can pop them in the Q&A there. But in the meantime, as we finish up here, Dean, if leaving our audience with one final thought here, what they should take away from this conversation, what would that be?
I would say think about what you give away for free and see how you can charge for it, especially in that sort of courtship stage of selling. There's probably something you have that you can reposition and remessage and sell and actually increase the quality and length of clients that you work with as well. So I think that there's some low-hanging fruit with most people with that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Dean. This has been, enjoyed this conversation. And next month, we already started talking about, we're looking at bringing on somebody as to do a live development of an Evergreen Revenue process for their business. So I'm sure there will be plenty of questions that come up and things that need to get answered as you see this actually being developed live too. So keep an eye out for our next emails about the community table, and we will see you next month. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, everyone. Cheers.
Take care.